Once upon a time, in a quiet village near a big river, there lived a young girl named Adanna. She was beautiful, smart, and full of life. Her dark skin shone in the sun, and her bright eyes sparkled like stars at night. Everyone in the village knew Adanna because she was always talking and laughing with the villagers. But Adanna had one bad habit. She never kept to her promise. If Adanna told her mother she would help with housework, when it's time for her to help, she would run off to play. If she promised to return something she borrowed, she would keep it for herself and pretend that she forgot to return it when asked. And if Adanna told her friends that she would share her sweets with them, when her mother bought her the sweets, she would eat everything alone and not give her friends anything. At first, the people believed Adanna's words, but after many broken promises, they stopped trusting her. Adanna never keeps a word, the people would say, shaking their heads. Anytime Adanna said, "I promise," people just smiled and shook their heads. They knew she would not do what she promised. But one day, these bad habits led her into a serious trouble. One hot afternoon, the sun was shining high in the sky. Adanna carried a calabash and walked to the river to fetch water. The cool breeze blew gently, and the sound of birds filled the air. As she bent down to fill her calabash, something caught her eyes. Inside the water, lying among smooth stones, was a golden bracelet. It was so beautiful. The sunlight made it shine beautifully, and Adanna's heart filled with excitement. "This bracelet is so fine," she thought. "If I wear it, I will look like a princess." She quickly stretched her hand into the water to grab it. But just as her fingers touched the surface of the water, a big frog jumped out of the water and landed right in front of her hand. Adanna gasped and stepped back. Her heart pounded in shock. The frog was large, with shiny green skin and round white eyes. But what shocked Adanna the most was that the frog could speak. "If you want this bracelet," the frog said in a deep voice, "you must make a promise." Adanna frowned. "Promise? What kind of promise?" she asked. The frog blinked slowly. "You must take me home. Let me eat at your table and allow me to sleep beside you for 3 nights. Adanna looked at the beautiful bracelet again. She didn't even think about what the frog was asking her to do. She only said, "Is that all?" What a small price to pay for such a fine bracelet, she thought. She smiled and quickly said, "I promise." But in her heart, she was lying. She had no intention of keeping the promise. The frog looked at her for a long moment, as if it knew she was lying. Then, without another word, it pushed the bracelet toward her. ADANNA grabbed it, smiled, and ran home. She forgot about the frog completely. That night, ADANNA and her family sat around the table, eating dinner. She admired the golden bracelet on her wrist, feeling proud. Suddenly came a knock on the door. "Someone is knocking at the door," said ADANNA'S mother from the kitchen. ADANNA froze. Then she heard a deep voice. "ADANNA, ADANNA, I have come for your promise." Her heart began to beat fast. Her mother looked at her and asked, "Who is that?" ADANNA forced a smile and said, "It's just the wind, Mama." But the knocking came again, louder this time. Her father stood up, frowning. "Who is knocking like this at night?" he asked, walking toward the door. He pulled the door open, and there, sitting outside the door, was the frog. It stared at ADANNA with its big round eyes. "ADANNA, my friend," the frog said, "you made a promise." ADANNA shook her head quickly. "I don't want you here. Go back to where you came from." The frog did not argue. It just smiled, a small knowing smile, then turned and hopped away into the night. ADANNA let out a deep breath. "It is over," she thought. But she was wrong. The next morning, strange things started happening to ADANNA. When she opened her mouth to talk, her voice sounded different. And when she ate her food, it tasted so bitter and she couldn't eat. When she looked in the mirror, her reflection looked strange. By afternoon, her skin felt damp and sticky. By evening, small bumps appeared on her arms, and by night, her fingers began to turn green. ADANNA'S eyes widened in fear. She ran to the river, her heart pounding. "Frog, where are you?" she shouted. A deep croak echoed from the water. The frog rose from the river, larger than before. Its eyes shone under the moonlight. "You broke your promise," the frog said. ADANNA fell to her knees and pleaded, "Please, I did not mean to. I will do anything," she begged. The frog studied her for a long moment, and then it said, "There is only one way to break the curse." ADANNA felt relieved. "Tell me, and I will do it," she said. The frog's voice was calm. "You must keep your promise, but now, instead of 3 nights, you must do it for 7 nights," he said. ADANNA'S stomach twisted and she shouted, 7 nights? The frog nodded. ADANNA had no choice but to agree. The first night, the frog sat at the dinner table with ADANNA and her family. Her parents were horrified, but the frog only ate quietly. That night, when ADANNA lay in bed, the frog sat beside her. She could not sleep. The second night, she let the frog sit closer to her. The third night, the frog showed her something in her dreams. It showed her visions of her past. She saw all the broken promises she had made. She saw how her mother felt when she refused to help her. She also saw how her friends felt when she never returned the things she borrowed from them. ADANNA felt ashamed. By the 6th night, something changed. She no longer hated the frog. The frog was just there with her like a friend. On the 7th night, the frog spoke one last time, saying, "Your course will break, but tell me, did you learn your lesson?" ADANNA looked into the frog's eyes. She nodded. "Yes, I have learned my lesson." The frog smiled. Then something magical happened. The frog began to glow before ADANNA'S eyes. It transformed into a handsome young man. "I was once like you," he said. "I also broke a promise and was cursed. But now, thanks to you, I am free." Then, just like that, he vanished. The next morning, ADANNA woke up. Her skin was normal again, but she was not the same girl again. From that day, she never made a promise she would not keep. And every time she passed the river, she would wonder if the frog would ever return. And from that day forward, she became the most honest girl in the village and was not known again for breaking promises, but for keeping her promises. This is the end of my story.